guys, welcome to another Movement Parallels Life guided practice. Today I've got a 20-minute natural movement workout for us. We're going to start in typical fashion with a ground-based movement flow, 6 movements, 6 minutes, dialing in our mobility and stability. Then we're going to get into a short combo, again, 6 movements. We're going to perform this interval style, 50 seconds of work, 10 seconds of transition time. We're going to be looking at crawling, hanging, and jumping today. At the end, we're going to go back to our ground-based movements, add more of a stretching vibe to it just to cool down, and that'll be it. Equipment-wise, you're going to need a bar to hang from and a mat or some comfortable floor space. It's quick, it's efficient, and it's nutritious movement. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Gonna kick things off by finding a comfortable seated position or lying position and just focusing on some diaphragmatic breathing. This is a way to get centered, get grounded, oxygenate the body. You can see I give myself a little tactile feedback by placing my hands on the abdomen. I'm breathing through my nose right now, inhaling deeply and feeling my stomach expand, exhaling and feeling the light compression in the midsection. So it's a simple practice, but a good habit to get into for optimizing performance. So first movement in our warm-up here is a long sit, open long sit with reaching. From this straddle sit position, I'm trying to sit as tall as I can, and then leaning from the waist, starting to extend in different directions, reaching forward, reaching sideways, reaching overhead. I can play around with moving my legs, close and open. A lot of strength in this position, a lot of strength and intention behind these reaches. And really, I'm just kind of keeping a curious mind here, playing around, finding the angles that are going to be most relevant, that are going to create the stretch that feels right for me. Really paying mind to continue my deep breathing as I go through all of these warm-up movements. I'm going to transition to side bent sit next and adding a rotational reach here. Again, whatever position we end up in, we do a lot of these reaching patterns, head turns, rotating. These movements provide some subtle variations that create the stretches that are going to help mobilize the joints and stretch the muscles. We've also got this piece here of coordination, just paying attention to how these movements are coordinated, how the legs are extending and changing position, how the arms and hands are changing to support. And what's interesting here is that we're looking at this as a total pattern, not an isolated movement, not an isolated exercise or stretch, but it's just a complete movement pattern. So there's so many different pieces that you can pay attention to within each of these seemingly simple movement variations. Next, we transition into a kneeling position. And as I'm shifting weight side to side, I'm just starting to rotate one leg open. See, I can point the toes and rotate over the inside of my big toe, just moving side to side and finding a nice opening for my hips and just helping these joints lubricate and get smoother in internal and external rotation. You can play around with your positioning within the kneel, whether you're sinking down low or coming up tall. Again, one of the biggest pieces of this ground-based movement practice is curiosity, experimentation, and seeing what you learn about your body from these various movements. The next pattern is a fun one, a lateral roll from a kneeling position. So from kneeling, we transition down to the side of the arm, the shoulder, roll across the back, and exit in a kneeling position. This is nice movement to give some tactile feedback to the back of the body, just increases overall body awareness, increases movement intelligence as we start to become a little bit more coordinated here. And this movement, who knows, could come in handy if in the case of a fall recovery. But just a fun one to do, and it'll become more coordinated, more smooth with practice. Notice if you're creating any impact anywhere, it shouldn't be jarring. It should be very smooth, very compact. So just keep working on it until you can start to feel it flow, feel it smooth out. Next pattern here, rotational rocking. So we're kind of making this tight tucked position and starting to create some movement back and forth, and then adding some rotation of the hips to rock around in a circle. And I'm also adding this cross crawl pattern or these leg strikes. So if we're looking at a defensive type situation, you're using your leg kicks to keep a threat away from you, and you're changing orientation with the rocking pattern. Real challenge here is keeping that tight tuck position as you rotate around, and your abs will definitely be feeling it if you're doing that right. Keep breathing here, keep those abs strong. And last movement in the series here, this warm up, we've got an inverted crawl position, and we're just going to play around with shifting forward and back. So I'm basically just moving my center of gravity around my base of support. So my base is a very broad base of support here, and I've got a lot of room to move around. And in the process, just a nice way to mobilize the shoulders. We'll see inverted crawl come in the mix later. So it's good to just get a feel for creating a strong points of support in this position. Feel free to play around, walk a little bit, feel where the demands are, if it's in your shoulders or your hamstrings. And just remember to keep breathing, try to find that balance between tension and relaxation. Now that's going to wrap up our warm-up portion. Let's get ready for the combo. Getting things started, we are going right into a foot-hand crawl. Trying to keep a contralateral pattern, meaning the opposite hand and foot step together, and trying to keep the hips and head at about the same height and keeping the spine long, not too much round in the back. Try to maintain deep breathing as you crawl forward and backward. If it gets too taxing, you can come down to the knees and make it a knee hand crawl, or you can just hold that crawl position statically, kind of like a plank with bent legs. And that's fine too. Just try to stay in this crawling pattern for the entire time. It's about 50 seconds. If you need a little bit more intensity, you can dial up the speed. 10 seconds to rest, and going to the next movement, an active hang. Real simple here. If you've got a thin pull-up bar, try to keep your thumbs wrapped around the bar, and you're going to keep your elbows straight and your shoulders engaged. You can think drawing the shoulders down your back and keeping some separation between the shoulders and the ears for the active hang. This is the best way to provide stability, support through the shoulder girdle. If you've got enough strength in your grip and your shoulders, you can play around with an alternating one-arm hang. Hold for a few seconds on one arm, reach up, grab the bar, transition to the other side. Again, find the tension and connection in the shoulders, in the core, and even in the lower body, but try to keep the face and the breathing relaxed. Nice. 10 seconds to transition to our next movement. It's going to be a broad jump to a rolling squat get up. Perform the broad jump, solid landing, and then you're going to sit back Using that same action we used in the rotational rock earlier, gonna rock back, generate some momentum to pull yourself up onto your feet into your squat and up to standing. This is a more complex movement, so you can always separate these two and just work on the broad jump or just work on the rolling squat get up. When you've got those pieces dialed in, bring them together and start to have fun with this. Maybe think of the practical application as you hit a broad jump, but you landed off balance, and you're using the rolling squat get up as a way to recover. Quick turnover time. Next movement we're looking at, we're back to crawling, and this time we're going to an inverted crawl. We worked on the shifting earlier, and now we can play around with actual locomotion, moving forward and backward. It's still a contralateral pattern, but you'll probably remember this movement from being a kid, doing crab crawls. And now you're going to work on refining the movement by increasing the length of your stride. Maybe start adding some movement variation, some diagonal movement, some lateral movement. And the big thing is just making sure that you're constantly pushing into the ground with your arms, never collapsing into the shoulders. Keep that stability. And this movement might come in handy for you if you're ever trying to traverse down a steep or a slippery hill. All right, make the transition back up to standing. Next hanging movement is going to be a knee tuck or oblique knee tuck. So I'm going to start out by keeping the arms straight, same active hang position, and now using more of my core to dynamically lift the knees up into the side. You'll start to feel this interconnection between the grip, the lats, and the core. And you can even start to add more of a pulling action into this. Now we started with straight arms, but now bending the elbows and pulling up a little bit higher. This takes a lot of strength, but I think it's very relevant strength, something that everyone should be able to do from a hanging position, lift their lower body up towards the bar or the branch or whatever it may be. And we're going to transition into our last movement today. We've got a lateral broad jump and a knee hand hip roll. Two movements that you're going to want to play around with, understand each piece first, and then work on integrating the two movements. So with our knee hand roll, we're down in a crawl position, sitting to the hip, rolling across the hips, and back into the crawl, and then finishing the movement by coming up to the feet. The broad jump, we're picking the feet up like we're jumping up over an obstacle and trying to land as softly as possible. Just a few more reps here, a few more seconds, and that'll be the end of our combo. If you want to lengthen your workout a little bit more, add a little bit more intensity, you can go back and perform another round of this combo before going on to the cool down. We're going to wrap up today with just about 5 minutes of stretching. And we're going to take some of the same movements that we used in the warm-up and put more of a stretching application behind it. So again, we're going to see this long sit position, but I'm going to reach forward. I'm leaning forward from the hips and trying to keep the spine as long as I can. My legs are really strong, reaching out away from the body. And I'm using some strength here to create a more prolonged stretch. Still focusing on deep breathing, strength where I need it, and relaxed everywhere else. Very intentional. I think it's really important with these stretches to find the right balance of effort and ease. So it's not about seeing how far you can push yourself or using some leverage to wrench on your body, wrench on your joints and muscles, but create the stretch through your strength and intention and find the right line of effort, the right intensity level, and sustain it with relaxed breathing. Few more deep breaths here. Any variation of this long sit that works for you. And then we're going to transition back to that side bent sit with the rotation reach. And just holding that reach, twisting through the torso. I'm thinking length through the spine, almost like reaching upward through the crown of my head, and then twisting through my shoulders, creating length in the spine and twist. Same idea. You want to ride this fine line of strength, of tension and relaxation. Make sure your breathing stays deep. We'll hit each side one more time. I like to count my breaths here, holding a stretch for at least 3 to 5 breaths, maybe longer. Gives me enough time to scan my body and check in with any areas I might be holding excessive tension, or noticing any resistance or differences that are going on inside my body between the right and left sides. Just making a transition here back to kneeling and going into that half kneeling crouch position. Did our kneeling hip rotations earlier. So now we're just going to hold that position. Again, trying to keep the alignment in the body, nice long spine. And I'm working on opening my hips here. Both hips working, stretching. I could play around with reaching patterns here. Now you can see as I reach forward, get a little bit more round in the spine, but still very much feeling it in my hips. Making sure that I don't go too deeply for my ability level, but I want to make sure that I can keep my relaxed breathing. Just all kinds of different ways to play around with these positions, find different angles and corners to stretch. It's so much more than just finding this position and stretching the muscles, but actually putting intention behind it, actually having this curiosity and figuring out what you can learn from your body. Let's finish today back in that inverted crawl position. I'm starting with my hips on the ground here and using this as a shoulder stretch. Chest stretch then as I drive my hips up to the ceiling. One of my favorites. I'm going to alternate it with a pike stretch or a going back to this long sit stretch and folding forward. Stretching the front of the body with the inverted crawl position. And just really nice to pair that with a nice deep stretch for the back line of the body with the long sit or pike position. Keep breathing deeply. And that'll bring us to the end of our practice. Thank you as always for joining me for this quick 20-minute natural movement workout, and we'll see you next time.